The great chamber of the Galactic Council was older than most civilizations. Its walls stretched upward into darkness, carved from stone that had witnessed 12,000 years of history. Floating platforms held representatives from 43 species, each one ancient, each one powerful, each one looking down at the small group of humans standing in the center of the floor. Ambassador Elena Vasquez kept her back straight and her face calm. She had been warned about this moment. The Council did not respect new species. To them, humanity was a child, asking to sit at the table of gods. "You may speak," said High Counselor Yarathene. She was Melodari, a species of tall, thin beings with silver skin and large dark eyes. Her voice entered Elena's mind directly, a telepathic whisper that felt like cool water. Elena cleared her throat. "Honored members of the Galactic Council, humanity comes before you today as a petitioner. We seek trade, knowledge, and friendship." A sound rippled through the chamber. It took Elena a moment to realize it was laughter. "Friendship," repeated a creature on a nearby platform. He was Velketh, an insectoid species with 4 arms and a hard shell that gleamed like polished metal. "Your species discovered faster-than-light travel only 30 years ago. You have visited perhaps a dozen star systems, and you speak to us of friendship?" Elena had prepared for this. Every species was young once, honored representative, even the Velketh. The laughter stopped. The Velketh leaned forward, his compound eyes reflecting Elena's image 1,000 times. "We were building cities when your ancestors were learning to walk upright. Do not compare us." "I meant no offense," Elena said. "I only meant that we all begin somewhere." High Counselor Yarathene raised a slender hand, and silence fell. "The human speaks correctly. All species begin somewhere. This is why we have procedures." She turned to address the chamber. "As required by our laws, we must review Earth's history before considering their application. Who will accept this duty?" For a long moment, no one spoke. Reviewing a new species' history was considered boring work, suitable only for junior officials with nothing better to do. "I will do it," said a voice from the upper platforms. Elena looked up. The speaker was another Velketh, older than the first, with a shell that had faded to a dull gray. Unlike the younger one, his eyes held no mockery, only a tired sort of curiosity. "Archon Telvaris," said the High Counselor, "you honor us with your service." "It has been long since I reviewed a new species," Telvaris said. "Perhaps these humans will be interesting." More laughter filled the chamber. Telvaris did not join in. He simply watched Elena with those 1,000-faceted eyes, and she felt for just a moment that he was truly seeing her. The formal ceremony continued for another hour. Elena answered questions about Earth's population, resources, and technology. The council members grew bored quickly. Humanity had nothing they wanted. No rare minerals, no unique sciences, no military power worth mentioning. They were just another young species, crawling out of their home system, hoping to find a place in a galaxy that had existed long before them. When it was over, Elena returned to the human embassy, a small building on the outskirts of the capital city. Her team was waiting for her. "How did it go?" asked Commander James Chen, her military advisor. "About as expected," Elena said. "They think we're children." "We kind of are," said Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, the team's historian. "Compared to them, anyway. The Velketh have been spacefaring for over 1,000,000 years. The Melodari stopped having wars before humans invented fire." Elena sat down heavily. "They assigned someone to review our history, an Archon named Telvaris." Dr. Okonkwo frowned. "Review our history? What does that mean?" "Standard procedure, apparently. Before they grant membership, they study the applicant species, make sure we're not dangerous or unstable." Elena rubbed her eyes. "It's just a formality. They'll skim through a few documents, check some boxes, and move on." What documents are they looking at? Commander Chen asked. Everything, Elena said. We gave them full access to Earth's historical databases. It was required. A strange silence fell over the room. Commander Chen and Dr. Okonkwo exchanged a look. Everything? Dr. Okonkwo repeated. Yes, why? The historian was quiet for a moment. It's probably nothing. I'm sure they've seen worse. But she did not sound convinced. 3 days later, Archon Telvaris sat alone in the archives of Varanthos Prime. The room was vast and quiet, filled with holographic displays that showed data from 1,000 worlds. Telvaris had reviewed many species in his long life. He had seen civilizations that practiced ritual sacrifice. He had seen empires built on slavery. He had seen every form of cruelty and violence the galaxy had to offer, or so he had thought. The human database floated before him, organized by category. He had started with the section labeled Military History, expecting to find a handful of conflicts. Every species had some wars in their past. The Velketh themselves had fought 3 major wars before they achieved lasting peace, 6,000 years ago. But as Telvaris opened the files, his 4 hands grew still. His compound eyes widened. The list of human conflicts did not end. He scrolled down, and down, and down. The wars had names, some simple, some strange. The 100 Years' War, the War of the Roses, the 7 Years' War, the 30 Years' War. They had numbers too. World War I, World War II. What kind of species needed to number their world wars? Telvaris selected a random conflict. The Second World War, dated roughly 80 years before humanity's first contact with alien life. A brief summary appeared. Duration, 6 years. Nations involved, over 30. Military deaths, approximately 20 million. Civilian deaths, approximately 50 million. Total casualties, 70 to 85 million. Telvaris read the numbers 3 times, then he checked them against his translation software. Then he checked them again. 70 million dead, in 6 years, in a single war. His species, the Velketh, had a total population of 9 billion. The humans had lost the equivalent of a small moon's population in one conflict. And that was just one war among hundreds. Telvaris leaned back in his chair. His old shell creaked with the movement. For the first time in centuries, he felt something he had almost forgotten. Fear. He reached for his communication device and sent a message to the Council administration. His request was simple. He needed more time to complete his review. When they asked him why, he found that he could not explain. The words would not come. How could he describe what he was seeing? How could he make them understand? All he could say was, "The numbers do not make sense. I need to look deeper." And deep in the archives, surrounded by the accumulated knowledge of 1,000 peaceful civilizations, Archon Telvaris began to realize that humanity was something the galaxy had never seen before. Something that should not exist. Something that terrified him to his core. 1 week passed. Then 2. The Council administration began to wonder why Archon Telvaris had not submitted his report. A simple historical review should take no more than a few days. What was taking so long? Telvaris did not answer their messages. He was too busy. The old Velketh had gathered a team of 12 researchers, each from a different species. They worked in shifts, around the clock, processing the human historical database. The room they worked in had become a place of shadows and whispers. No one laughed anymore. No one made jokes about the primitive newcomers. "I do not understand," said Kiramoth, a young researcher from Thessia. Her species resembled earth butterflies, with delicate wings and large, gentle eyes. "These numbers cannot be correct. The translation software must be broken." "The software is fine," Telvaris said. "I have checked it 17 times. But this says," Kiramoth's voice trembled, "this says that in their Second World War alone, humans killed more of each other than my entire species has ever numbered. In our entire history, every Thessian who has ever lived would not equal this death toll. Yes, Telvarus said quietly, I know. Another researcher, a massive stone-like being called Gorath, rumbled from across the room. Perhaps they count differently. Perhaps their definition of death is not the same as ours. Their definition is the same, said a Melodari researcher. Her silver skin had grown pale over the past week. I have touched their minds at a distance. I have felt their memories. Death means the same to them as it does to us. They feel pain. They grieve. They love their children and mourn their parents. They are not so different from us in their hearts. Then how, Gorath demanded, how can they do this to each other? No one had an answer. Telvarus stood before a massive holographic display. It showed a timeline of human history, with every recorded conflict marked in red. The red lines overlapped and crossed and tangled together until the entire timeline looked like it was bleeding. They do not have periods of war, he said slowly. They have periods of slightly less war. At any given moment in their history, somewhere on their planet, humans were killing each other, always, without pause, for their entire existence as a species. Every species has conflicts, said another researcher, a being of pure light called Illumin. We Vashti fought among ourselves before we achieved unity. How many wars did your species fight? Telvarus asked. Illumin flickered. 3. 3 great wars over a span of 50,000 years. After the third, we swore never again. The humans have a list, Telvarus said. A list of what they call major conflicts. Not small fights between villages. Major conflicts involving nations and empires. The list has over 500 entries. And those are only the ones they considered important enough to record in detail. Silence filled the room. Kiramoth made a sound that might have been a sob. How are they still alive? How did they not destroy themselves? That, Telvarus said, is the question I cannot answer. He pulled up another display. This one showed something the humans called the Cold War. It had lasted for nearly 50 years, and somehow, despite its name, it had not been cold at all. It had been a period of constant fear, constant tension, and constant preparation for destruction. During this time, Telvarus explained, 2 human nations built weapons capable of ending all life on their planet. Not just human life, all life. They pointed these weapons at each other for half a century. And then they used them? Gorath asked. No. They built enough weapons to destroy their world many times over. Waited. They called it mutually assured destruction. Both sides knew that if one attacked, both would be annihilated. So neither attacked. Illumin's light flickered rapidly, a sign of extreme distress. They lived like that? For 50 years? Knowing that at any moment everything could end? They raised children during this time, Telvarus said. They built schools and hospitals and parks. They fell in love and grew old. They did all the normal things that living beings do, all while knowing that nuclear fire could fall from the sky at any moment. They are insane, Gorath said. They must be insane. The Melodari researcher shook her head. They are not insane. That is what frightens me. I have touched their minds. They are completely, perfectly sane. They know exactly what they are doing. They always have. Telvarus moved to another display. I found something else. During their Second World War, the humans developed their first nuclear weapons. 2 of them were used on a nation called Japan. He showed them the images, the mushroom clouds, the flattened cities, the shadows burned into walls, the only remains of people who had been alive 1 second and gone the next. Over 200,000 dead, Telvarus said, in 2 explosions. And do you know what the humans did after this? No one spoke. They built more weapons, bigger weapons, better weapons. Within 20 years they had enough nuclear bombs to kill every living thing on their planet several times over, and they kept building more. Kiramoth stood up suddenly. Her wings were shaking. I need to leave. I cannot process this anymore. She fled from the room, and no one tried to stop her. Telvaris watched her go with something like sympathy in his ancient eyes. He understood. He had felt the same way when he first began reading. There is one more thing I must show you, he said to the remaining researchers. Something I discovered last night. He pulled up a new display. It showed a single number. This is the estimated total of humans killed by other humans throughout their recorded history, not including disease or natural death, just violence, war, murder, genocide, execution. The number hung in the air, glowing softly. 1 billion. 1 billion of their own kind, Telvaris said, and this is a conservative estimate. The true number may be higher, much higher. Gorath's stone body cracked, a sign of extreme shock. That is more than the population of most species in the Council. They have killed more of themselves than many species have ever produced. Yes, Telvaris said, and yet they are still here, still growing, still expanding into the stars. He turned to face his team, and his old eyes held something that none of them had ever seen in him before. True, deep, terrible fear. We have been looking at this wrong, he said. We have been asking how a species could survive such violence, but perhaps that is not the right question. Then what is? Illumin asked. Telvaris was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. The right question is, what kind of species could survive such violence? What kind of being could endure this much death, this much horror, and not only survive, but thrive? He looked back at the glowing number. Whatever humans are, they are not like us. They are something else entirely, something the galaxy has never seen. He turned away from the display and moved toward his communication terminal. What are you doing? The Meladari asked. I am asking the Council to delay the membership vote, Telvaris said. We have studied their numbers, we have studied their wars, but we have not yet studied the most important thing. What is that? Telvaris paused at the door. Their tactics, their strategies, the way they actually fight. His shell seemed to grow darker, as if a shadow had fallen over him. I fear that what we have seen so far is only the beginning. And as he left the room, the remaining researchers looked at each other in silence. They had spent their lives studying the history of the galaxy. They had seen wonders and horrors beyond counting. But nothing had prepared them for humanity. And somehow, they all knew that the worst was yet to come. The council chamber was full. Every representative had come to hear the preliminary briefing on humanity. Word had spread through the great halls of Aranthos Prime. Something strange was happening with the Human Review. Something that had made old Archon Telvaris call an emergency session. High Counselor Yarathene sat in her place of honor, her silver face unreadable. Around her, 43 species waited in tense silence. Telvaris stood at the center of the chamber. He looked older than he had 3 weeks ago. His shell had lost its shine, and his movements were slow and heavy. Behind him, holographic displays waited to show the horrors he had discovered. Thank you all for coming, he said. His voice was steady, but those who knew him could hear the strain beneath it. I will not waste your time with pleasantries. What I am about to show you will disturb you. Some of you may wish to leave. I will not judge you if you do. A ripple of confused murmurs passed through the chamber. What could possibly disturb beings who had seen the rise and fall of 1,000 civilizations? We have already shared our preliminary findings, Telvaris continued. You know about the scale of human violence, the billions dead, the endless wars. But today I must show you something worse. He activated the first display. Humans do not simply fight wars, he said. They study them. They write books about them. They teach their children about them. They have transformed violence into an art form. The display showed a list of titles: The Art of War, On War, The Prince, The Book of Five Rings. Hundreds of books, spanning thousands of years, all dedicated to a single subject: how to kill more effectively. These are not histories, Telvaris explained. These are instruction manuals, guides to victory in battle. Every human civilization, without exception, has produced them. They do not see war as a failure or a tragedy. They see it as a skill to be mastered. A Velketh general named Carthax leaned forward. Many species have military manuals. This is not unusual. With respect, General, you have not seen what I have seen. Telvaris changed the display. Human military doctrine evolves faster than any we have ever recorded. Watch. The display showed a progression of images. First, ancient humans fighting with sticks and stones. Then bronze weapons, iron, steel, gunpowder, machines, and finally, weapons that could split atoms themselves. 10,000 years, Telvaris said. In 10,000 years, they went from throwing rocks to creating weapons that could destroy planets. Do you know how long it took the Velketh to make the same journey? 800,000 years, General Carthax said quietly. Yes, and the Velketh are not slow learners. The humans are simply faster. Much faster. Especially when it comes to finding new ways to kill. He showed them more. Trench warfare, the insanity of millions dying for a few meters of mud. Blitzkrieg, the terrifying speed of armored vehicles crushing everything in their path. Guerrilla tactics, how a small weak force could defeat a much larger enemy through patience and cruelty. They adapt, Telvaris said. That is the most frightening thing about them. When one tactic stops working, they invent another. When their weapons are banned, they build different weapons. When they sign treaties of peace, they begin planning for the next war. They never stop. They never rest. They are always preparing. A Thessian representative raised a trembling wing. Surely they have rules, limits? Even the most violent species have some boundaries. Telvaris was quiet for a moment. They have rules. They call them the laws of war. But they also have a concept that has no translation in any other language we know. They call it total war. He showed them what total war meant. Cities burned to the ground, crops destroyed so that enemy soldiers would starve. Civilians targeted alongside warriors. Children, elderly, sick, all considered valid targets if they supported the enemy in any way. In total war, Telvaris said, there are no innocent people. Everyone is an enemy. Everything is a target. The goal is not just to defeat the opposing army. The goal is to destroy the opposing civilization completely, to erase its ability to fight forever. The chamber had grown very still. Even the oldest, most hardened representatives were pale. I do not understand, said High Counselor Yarathine. Her telepathic voice was faint, as if she were struggling to maintain control. How can beings who feel love and compassion do such things? That is what makes them so dangerous, Telvaris said. They do feel love. They do feel compassion. They weep for their dead. They build monuments to remember the fallen. They write poetry about the horror of war, and then they do it again, and again, and again. He showed them images of human memorials, vast walls carved with the names of the dead, eternal flames burning in memory of those lost, museums dedicated to teaching future generations about past atrocities. They know what they are, Telvaris said. They know what they do. They remember it, they mourn it, and they cannot stop. It is as if violence is woven into their very being, a part of them they cannot remove, no matter how hard they try. General Carthax stood up slowly. I must ask a military question. You have shown us their history. You have shown us their tactics. But what would happen if we had to fight them? If it came to war between the Council and humanity? The chamber held its breath. Telvaris looked at the general with tired eyes. I have spent 3 weeks studying their military capabilities. Their current forces are small. Their technology is inferior to ours. By any reasonable measure, we should win easily. But, Carthax pressed, but humans do not fight reasonable wars. Telvaris pulled up one final display. It showed a graph, a simple line tracking human military deaths over the past century. Look at this. During their Second World War, they were losing, badly. Their enemies were stronger, better equipped, and better positioned. Any sensible species would have surrendered. They did not surrender, Carthax said. It was not a question. They did not surrender. They fought harder. They sacrificed everything, their wealth, their resources, their lives, for victory. They chose death over defeat. Telvaris paused. I have run simulations, General. If we went to war with humanity tomorrow, we would probably win. SP. What cost? We would have to kill them all, every single one, because as long as even a handful survive, they will rebuild, they will remember, and they will come for revenge. They have done it before, to each other. They would do it to us. Silence filled the chamber. High Counselor Yerathine rose from her seat. Her silver face had gone white. She stopped, swaying slightly. I need a moment. 2 Melodari attendants rushed to help her. The High Counselor, the most powerful telepath in the galaxy, a being who had never shown weakness in 500 years of service, had to be escorted from the chamber. As she left, she passed a window that overlooked the human embassy far below. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood in the garden, looking up at the stars, unaware that her entire species had just been discussed like a dangerous disease. Yerathine paused at the window. She watched the human woman for a long moment. She could feel Elena's mind from here, a warm, gentle presence, full of hope and curiosity. There was no malice in her, no hunger for blood, just a simple wish for her people to find their place among the stars. And somehow, that made everything so much worse. Because the High Counselor knew now what humanity was. They were not monsters. They were not demons. They were something far more terrifying. They were people, just like everyone else. And they could do things that no other people in the galaxy had ever imagined. Yerathine turned away from the window and walked down the corridor, her attendants supporting her on either side. Behind her, in the chamber, the council continued to debate. But the debate had changed. They were no longer discussing whether to accept humanity. They were discussing what to do about them. The emergency session was held in secret, in a chamber deep beneath the council building. No records were kept, no witnesses were allowed. Only the most senior representatives of each species attended, along with Archon Telvaris and his research team. High Counselor Yerathine sat at the head of the table. She had recovered from her earlier weakness, but something had changed in her eyes, a shadow that had not been there before. We are here to discuss the human problem, she said. Nothing said in this room will leave this room. Speak freely. General Carthax spoke first. I recommend immediate military action. We should quarantine their home system and prevent them from expanding further. They are too dangerous to be allowed into galactic society. You would imprison an entire species? Asked the Melodari representative. For crimes they might commit? For crimes they have already committed, Carthax replied. What they have done to their own kind, they will eventually do to us. We cannot punish them for harming themselves, said Gorath, the stone-like being. By that logic, we should quarantine half the species in the galaxy. Half the species in the galaxy have not killed 1 billion of their own people. The argument went back and forth. Some wanted to destroy humanity before they became a threat. Others wanted to isolate them. A few suggested trying to change them, sending teachers and counselors to help them overcome their violent nature. Telvaris listened in silence. He had been thinking for days about what he had learned, and he had come to a conclusion that frightened him more than anything else. "You are all asking the wrong question," he said finally. The chamber fell quiet. Everyone turned to look at the old Velketh. "We keep asking what to do about humanity," Telvaris said. "How to contain them, how to control them, how to stop them. But we have not asked the most important question of all." "What question?" Yarathine asked. Telvaris stood up slowly. His old joints ached, but he forced himself to stand straight. "How are they still alive?" The representatives looked at each other in confusion. "Think about it," Telvaris continued. "They have been killing each other for their entire existence. They have built weapons capable of destroying their planet many times over. They have come to the edge of extinction again and again. By every logical calculation, they should have destroyed themselves thousands of years ago." "Perhaps they were lucky," someone suggested. "No species is that lucky, not for that long." Telvaris began to pace, his forearms clasped behind his back. "I have spent my entire life studying civilizations. I have seen species rise and fall. I have seen what happens when violence spirals out of control. And I tell you now, humanity should not exist. Their survival is impossible. And yet they do exist," Yarathine said. "Yes, they do, which means we are missing something." Telvaris stopped pacing and faced the council. "So, I looked deeper. I stopped studying their wars and started studying what came after their wars." He pulled out a small device and projected images into the air. After their Second World War, the humans created something called the United Nations, an organization dedicated to preventing future conflicts. It has not always succeeded, but it has prevented several wars that would have killed millions. He showed more images. After their atomic bombs were used, they created treaties to limit nuclear weapons. They did not eliminate them, but they controlled them. They chose not to destroy themselves, even when they had the power to do so. They also created courts to punish those who committed atrocities in war. They put their own leaders on trial for crimes against humanity. They looked at the worst things their species had done and said this was wrong. This must never happen again. General Carthax made a dismissive sound, and then they kept fighting anyway. Yes, they kept fighting, but less, slower, with more rules. Telvaris leaned forward. "That is what we missed. The violence is only half the story. The other half is the struggle against violence, the constant, endless effort to be better than they are." "You are saying they fight their own nature?" Yarathine asked. "I am saying they are at war with themselves in more ways than one. They wage war against their enemies, yes, but they also wage war against the part of themselves that wants to wage war. It is extraordinary, exhausting, and somehow they keep doing it." The chamber was silent as the representatives processed this new information. "I found something else," Telvaris said. "They have a word for people who fight in wars and then return to peaceful life. They call them veterans." "What is unusual about that?" Gorath asked. "The veterans do not stay soldiers. They go back to their families. They become farmers, teachers, doctors. They raise children and grow old in peace. And here is the part that amazed me. Their society honors them for this. Not just for their violence, but for their ability to stop being violent." He showed them images of human veterans, old men and women with medals on their chests, surrounded by children and grandchildren. People who had killed and watched their friends die, now living ordinary lives, full of love and laughter. "They can turn it off," Telvaris said softly. "They can go from war to peace and back again. They can be killers and caretakers, destroyers and builders. It is as if they contain every possibility within themselves, and they choose which one to be." "You are saying they are not purely violent?" I am saying they are something we have never seen before. They are a species that knows exactly what they are capable of. All the horror, all the cruelty, all the destruction, and they choose, again and again, to be something else. Not always successfully, not always wisely, but they try. They never stop trying. Before anyone could respond, a junior aide burst into the chamber. His face was pale with shock. "Forgive the interruption," he gasped, "but there is an emergency. A Harken raiding fleet has attacked a human colony on the frontier." The chamber erupted in noise. The Harken were a species of pirates and slavers who preyed on weak colonies. They were vicious but cowardly, always choosing targets that could not fight back. "How large is the colony?" Carthax demanded. "Approximately 50,000 humans. The Harken fleet has 30 ships. They are demanding immediate surrender." "Then the humans will surrender," someone said. "What choice do they have?" The aides swallowed hard. "That is the problem, honored representatives. The humans are not surrendering. They are fighting back." "Fighting back? With what? They have no military force at that colony." "I do not know, but the Harken commander has sent out a distress call." The aide looked like he might faint. "The pirates are asking for help. They say the humans are what?" Yarathene demanded. The aide could barely speak. "They say the humans are coming for them. All of them. Every human on the planet. Men, women, children. They have armed themselves with anything they can find. They are not trying to defend. They are hunting the Harken, ship by ship, soldier by soldier." "That is impossible," Carthax said. "Civilians cannot fight trained pirates." The Harken commander used a word I do not know. He said the humans have gone berserk. He said they are not fighting like normal people. They are fighting like animals, like demons. He said he has never seen anything like it. The chamber fell silent. Telvaris closed his eyes. He had known this moment would come. He had hoped it would not, but he had known. "Put it on the screen," Yarathene ordered. "Show us what is happening." The aide nodded and activated the main display. A moment later, the chamber was looking at a live feed from the frontier. A tiny human colony, under attack by pirates, fighting back in ways that no one had ever expected. And as the council watched, they began to understand what Telvaris had been trying to tell them. Humanity was not just violent. Humanity was something far more dangerous. Humanity was unpredictable. And now, for the first time, the galaxy was going to see what happened when you pushed them too far. The council watched in silence as the battle unfolded on the main display. The Harken had expected an easy victory. They had raided hundreds of colonies across the galaxy. They knew how these things went. A show of force, a few demonstrations of violence, and the colonists would surrender. Then came the looting, the enslaving, the destruction. Simple, profitable, safe. But New Helsinki was not like other colonies. The Harken landing parties had touched down, expecting frightened farmers and terrified families. Instead, they found empty streets, empty buildings, an entire city that had vanished in the hours since the attack began. Then, the humans attacked. They came from everywhere, from buildings and sewers and forests. They came with weapons they had built themselves, crude guns made from pipes, explosives assembled from farming chemicals, blades forged from scrap metal. They came with tools and rocks and bare hands. The council watched as a Harken soldier was pulled into an alley by 3 human teenagers. The soldier was armed with a plasma rifle. The teenagers had kitchen knives. The teenagers won. "This is impossible," General Carthax whispered. "Untrained civilians cannot defeat armed soldiers." "They are not fighting like civilians," Telvaris said. His voice was strange, almost distant. "They are fighting like their ancestors did, like the species we read about in their histories." The Harken commander appeared on the screen. His face was covered in blood, some of it his own, most of it not. "We demand negotiations," he screamed into his communication device. "We are willing to withdraw. We want only safe passage. Please, please stop them." A human voice responded. It was calm, almost bored. "You attacked our home. You threatened our families. There will be no negotiations." "Then what do you want?" the commander begged. The voice was silent for a moment. Then, "We want you to understand that you made a mistake." The communication cut off. The council watched as the Harkin tried to retreat to their ships. They did not make it. Human militia units had already surrounded the landing zones. The pirates who tried to run were cut down. The pirates who tried to surrender were taken prisoner, but only after being beaten so badly that they would never forget this day. One Harkin ship managed to take off. It rose into the sky, burning toward orbit, desperate to escape. It did not escape. A human cargo vessel, an unarmed transport ship designed to carry grain and machinery, accelerated directly into the Harkin ship's path. The collision destroyed both vessels instantly. "They sacrificed themselves," the Melodari representative said, in horror. "They died just to stop that ship from escaping." "They did not want witnesses," Telvaris said quietly. "They did not want anyone to escape and tell others that attacking humans was possible." The battle lasted 6 more hours. When it was over, not a single Harkin survived. 30 ships, over 2,000 pirates, all dead or captured. The humans had lost 43 people. They mourned each one, and then they began rebuilding. The council chamber was silent. No one moved. No one spoke. For long minutes, the most powerful beings in the galaxy sat in stunned disbelief. Finally, the main display flickered. Ambassador Elena Vasquez appeared on the screen. She stood in the ruins of New Helsinki, surrounded by exhausted colonists and captured Harkin prisoners. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," she said. Her voice was calm and professional, as if she were delivering a routine report. "I apologize for any disruption to the membership proceedings. As you may have heard, one of our colonies was attacked by pirates. The situation has been resolved." She paused and looked at something off-screen. "I understand there may be questions. I am happy to answer them. But first, I would like to inquire about the status of our membership application. Has a decision been reached?" No one answered. The representatives could only stare at this small human woman who spoke of battle and death as if they were minor inconveniences. "Perhaps we should discuss this matter in person," Yerathine said finally. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Would you be willing to return to Varanthos Prime, Ambassador?" "Of course," Elena said. "I can be there within 2 days." The connection ended. The display went dark. For a long moment no one moved. Then Gorath spoke, his stone voice rumbling through the chamber. "What are they?" No one had an answer. 2 days later, Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood once again in the great council chamber. She was alone, facing 43 species who looked at her with something they had never felt before. Fear. "Ambassador," Yarathine began, "we have completed our review of humanity's history. We have many questions." "I will answer what I can," Elena said. "Your species has been at war with itself for your entire existence. You have killed billions of your own kind. You have created weapons capable of destroying your world. And yet you come to us speaking of peace and friendship." Yarathine's telepathic voice trembled slightly. "How do you explain this contradiction?" Elena was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled, a small, sad smile that held centuries of sorrow and hope. "We are a species at war with ourselves," she said. "Not just against each other, against our own nature. Every day, every human being fights a battle between what they could be and what they should be. Sometimes we lose that battle. Sometimes we do terrible things, but we keep fighting. We never stop trying to be better. And what about the colonists? General Carthax asked. They killed 2,000 pirates without mercy. They showed no restraint. They showed perfect restraint, Elena replied. They protected their families. They defended their home. And when the battle was over, they stopped. They took prisoners. They cared for the wounded, even the enemy wounded. They did what was necessary, and nothing more. You call that restraint? I call it humanity. Elena's voice was firm. We are capable of terrible things. We know this better than anyone. But we are also capable of choosing when to use that capability and when to put it away. Yarathene leaned forward. Ambassador, I must ask you one more question. Throughout our review, we have studied your wars, your weapons, your tactics. We have learned what humans can do, but we never learned why. Her dark eyes met Elena's. What do humans fight for? Elena was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the vast chamber. We fight for the people we love, for the futures we dream of, for the belief that tomorrow can be better than today. She paused. We fight because we know what happens when good people do nothing. We fight because someone has to stand between the innocent and the darkness. And we fight because despite everything, despite all the horror and cruelty in our history, we still believe that peace is possible, that kindness is worth protecting, that life has meaning. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of species that had existed for millions of years. You have seen what we can destroy, she said, but you have not seen what we can build. Given the chance, humanity will surprise you, not with our violence, but with our hope. The chamber was silent. Then, slowly, High Counselor Yarathene rose to her feet. Her silver face was unreadable, but her voice was steady. The Council has reached a decision, she said. Humanity is granted provisional membership in the Galactic Union. A murmur ran through the chamber. Shock, disbelief, perhaps even fear. There will be conditions, Yarathene continued. Restrictions, monitoring. But we have decided that it is better to have humanity as an ally than as an enemy. And perhaps, she looked at Elena with something that might have been respect. Perhaps we can learn something from a species that has stared into the abyss of its own nature and chosen to keep fighting for the light. Elena bowed her head. Thank you, High Counselor. Humanity is honored. In the years that followed, humanity became many things to the galaxy. Explorers, diplomats, artists, teachers. And when the darkness came, when pirates raided and empires threatened and ancient evils stirred, humanity became something else. Protectors. The galaxy slept a little easier, knowing that humans stood watch. A species that understood violence better than anyone. A species that had waged war against itself for thousands of years, and won. But the galaxy also slept a little more uneasily, because they had seen what humanity could do when pushed. They had seen the fury and the fire. They had seen how quickly those peaceful farmers and gentle diplomats could become something else entirely. And deep in the archives of Varanthos Prime, old Archon Telvaris kept a copy of every human war record ever written. He read them, sometimes, late at night, when the chambers were empty and the stars were cold. He read them to remind himself of a simple truth. Humanity was the guardian of the galaxy, and the galaxy should be very, very glad that they were on its side.